Most businesses only focus on growing and expanding, and they give little to no attention to their exit strategies until after exit is staring them in the face. Learn here at Boosting Business Value, brought to you by Blue Sky Business Resources. You'll discover how to shape a more durable and saleable business, and how to implement a powerful, well-planned, and rewarding exit. Join Dr. David Gruder and Jason Tuzinkewich as they deliver actionable tips for lower middle market company owners, executives, and their trusted advisors. Find out where your business currently stands, how you can meet your revenue objectives more reliably, and how to grow your venture to the next level, all with a smooth and fruitful exit in mind. Here are your hosts, Dr. David and Jason.
Welcome. This is the last piece in a 4-part series that we've been doing that's providing you with an overview of the exit mindset and operational strategies. So in this episode, we're going to cover how to develop a helpful relationship with external risk factors and upheavals. And for those of you who are new to the show, I'm Dr. David Gruder, the business life cycle, exit planning, and post-acquisition psychologist for Blue Sky Business Resources. And with me is the ever wonderful co-host, Jason Tuzinkewich, Blue Sky's Chief Operations Officer. Take it away, Jason.
Hey, thanks, Doctor. I'm so excited about this episode. I'm feeling a sense of closure already. What we're going to talk about today starts with some pretty serious challenges, actually. And the thing that gets me about this topic is that it hinges on the entrepreneur and the executive team's feeling of not having direct control. And, especially for hard drivers who, started their business largely because they believe that they can do it better than what they've experienced in the world. That's the type of person that doesn't like to not have control. And when you really don't like something like that, you tend to ignore it and allow it to kind of become its own blind spot. And so I'm excited about this episode because we're going to talk about how business owners, executive teams, and advisory teams can help exercise the indirect control that we can exert over these external risks and threats that we've been told our whole life. External threats, those are out of your control. We're gonna help give you some of that control back. And so I'm deeply excited about this conversation.
Yes, indeed, and well said. So where we're going to start with is we're going to cover 3 classifications or varieties of threats: organizational, sociological, and personal. And so we'll start off with organizational.
Yeah, and the organizational threats, I think this is the group of threats that people are most aware of or comfortable with. This is kind of the Porter's 5 forces group of threats, where you're talking about how much power can your suppliers exert over you in bargaining the sale of resources and supplies? How much, on the other side of the equation, how much power do customers have in bargaining with you and exerting their will into your operations? Are there threats of customers substituting a different product for yours? And are there threats of disruption, brand new products hitting the marketplace that make your product or service offering irrelevant or less appealing? And then, all of this kind of plays into what does the overall competitive environment for your operation, what does that look like? How, is it a race to the bottom type of environment? Is it fragmented where there are a lot of people doing their own thing and it's just a matter of who gets in front of the customer first that wins the race? What does that environment look like? Because that's going to dictate your revenue model. It's going to dictate your marketing and branding approach. It's going to dictate a lot of things. And then outside of the organizational, some of the less known or appreciated external factors but still in the grouping of external threats that people understand exist are the sociological threats. And that's, the economy. A lot of people are paying attention to economic external factors from COVID through the supply chain issues and inflation. Also national and international political environments. Are there trade wars? Are there tariffs? Are foreign governments going to do something that disrupts your ability to sell in their economy? And finally, within this sociological bucket is disruption of social norms. When our lifestyle changes in a material way, and all of a sudden we're not having meetings in person because we have to do it on Zoom. How are those disruptions of our social norms going to impact your ability to conduct business? And so, those are two of the three. Doctor, you're going to talk about the one that I think people don't think about the most. And so I'm excited for you to surprise and wow them with this one.
Well, thanks. And, we're focusing in this episode on external risks and threats, not the internal ones in your own company, which we might want to cover in another episode, actually. But the important interplay between external threats and us and you as the CEO or as an executive or as a founder has to do with our attitude about what we can and can't do with external risk factors and threats. And what that personal level response is either an empowered response and a response that says, yes, I'm not the boss of those external factors. And yet there are a lot of things that I can do and we can do inside my company to deal with those external factors and actually turn certain external factors that seem negative on the surface into great business opportunities for us. What interferes with that kind of positive attitude and mindset about external risk factors and threats is something that in psychology is referred to as learned helplessness. And what learned helplessness is a fancy psychobabble term for is where we've been trained to believe that we have less power, we have less impact, we have less choice-making capacity than we actually have in dealing with factors that are themselves outside of our control. And so, some people develop an allergy to personal power, which is where they are in victim mentality or learned helplessness. And some people become obsessed with and intoxicated by power, and they become the power controllers, the tyrants, where they have an overemphasized kind of relationship with power. But for the purpose of this episode, what we want to focus on in dealing with threats is you getting right with your relationship with power so that you're not imagining that you have more power over external factors than you have, nor are you in a state of learned helplessness where you think you have less power to deal with those factors than you actually have.
Yes, there's danger at the extremes.
Indeed. And so, of course, we're not going to leave you hanging by just mentioning those kinds of threats and risk factors, because we want to move into the meat and potatoes, if you will, or the vegetables, if you're vegetarian, of this episode, which has to do with there being different operational and managerial philosophies that can mitigate the power that those threats can have over your company if you have right relationship with power, if you're not in learned helplessness. And so we're going to go through those three categories again in terms of organizational, sociological, and personal.
Fantastic. Yeah. And this is the part that I get excited about, because we're going to take the power back. And we always want to give our business owners and their advisory team the ability to control their own future and destiny. So this is going to be great fun. So we're going to start with the organizational items again. And when we look at both the bargaining power of suppliers and the bargaining power of customers, it starts with diversification, limiting your concentration. And this can be in a lot of different ways, starting with suppliers. What is the biggest threat to your supply chain, and what is the biggest power that your supplier has? Is it geography? Are they close by, or are they overseas? And they could be, your supply line could be threatened by, trade wars, by storms, by, disasters, by some dum-dum blocking the Suez Canal. There are a lot of different threats that can go into disrupting your supply chain. Having a diversification strategy that allows you to move around your supply chain to mitigate those situations when they happen is going to put the power of bargaining back into your hands and take some of that bargaining authority away from the suppliers and give you control. Because if they start getting dumb with their expectations, their lead times, their costs, you can say, okay, that's fine. I'm gonna cool down on ordering from you for a little while, and I'm going to go order from supplier B or supplier C because I have options. With customer concentration, it's kind of the same thing, a little bit different, right? With customers, you're going to want to, one, make sure that you aren't relying on one individual customer for more than 12% of your revenue, because if that customer goes away, you've got to backfill that revenue. But you can also look at different industries. If you're selling to one market, can you sell to a similar market in a different geography? Can you sell to a completely different market? I had a client that a few years back that was a gear manufacturer. He manufactured specialty gears for pumping equipment in the oil and gas industry. Well, when we started looking at his options, we noticed that there was a very, very similar gear used in the rail industry. Now he's got a whole different market that he can sell to. And when oil and gas does what oil and gas does every couple of years, he's not going to be sitting in the lurch. And so looking at the different vectors to new customers and options to get your products out there in a way that is diversified is going to give you, again, more control over what you sell for, what your revenue model looks like, what happens in times of other threats coming into play. With regard to threat of substitution, this is one where you have to be laser focused on what is your competitive advantage. What makes your product different, unique, and special from your competitors? And then how do you get that message out to the client base? How do you leverage your uniques to make your product appear superior to everything else on the marketplace, so that it's no longer a decision of, oh, well, this one costs less, I'm going to try it this time.
And what I'll add there is that this ties in with understanding your marketplace, because in a broader marketplace for whatever you sell, there are going to be individuals or individual companies for whom your uniqueness doesn't matter. And there are going to be others for whom your uniqueness in how you deliver what you deliver, their reaction is going to be, where have you been all my life? So you really need to understand your sub-niching, your micro-niching in your marketplace in order to right match your unique capacities and attributes with the needs of those micro niches that they're not going to get met from anybody other than you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, Doctor.
Thank you.
And the last one is, you want to look at how do you become an innovation company? How do you lead the way in your marketplace so that rather than being worried about disruption, you are the disruptor? And in the competitive environment and the threat of substitution, the simplest analogy that I always think about is a farmer's market. If you ever go to a local farmer's market, all the farmers are selling basically the same produce because it's what grows in that region. But one farmer may have the most beautiful stand. Another farmer is giving away free recipe sheets to use the produce that they're selling. Another one may have jams or other products that they've already turned their vegetables into that you can buy. And so it's a matter of figuring out, when you're in that marketplace where everybody's growing the same thing, how do you get the sales against your neighbor who is selling the same products? And so, between innovation and understanding your competitive environment and maximizing the uniques of your brand, those are kind of the three legs of the stool that will make you an unstoppable force. Now, moving into the thank you. Moving into the sociological issues, first and foremost, you want to understand the impacts of the changes that are coming. You will only be able to understand the potential impacts if you know what changes are underway. If there's one thing we know about our political environment, it's that it is a very slow moving machine. That means that we have a lot of time to know what's being discussed, what bills are being voted on, and what the likely structure of these bills are well in advance of them getting, one, approved, and two, going into effect. So just simply by, keeping your head up, looking around and seeing what winds are blowing and understanding what the impact they will have on your industry, on your marketplace, you'll be able to start strategizing and be ahead of the rest of your peers who are keeping their eyes focused inward on their business. And so you'll have an advantage just by paying attention. And then, there are certain environments that have different benefits. There are benefits to an inflationary environment. It's a great time to pay off debt in real money, right? Because that money is worth less. And so essentially you can pay off more debt more quickly in real money than you would in a deflationary period where the money is actually becoming worth more. And so it's more expensive to pay off debt. So understanding the impact on your balance sheet of these different environments and how do you manage the value of money compared to the strength of your balance sheet. So that's one thing that you can look at, understanding what your balance sheet is telling you, when to stock up on your inventory for a lower cost. If you see prices rising, you may want to go from a lean inventory to a surplus inventory so that you're buying before the prices go up or at the lower end of increasing prices. And then you can sell your finished goods at that increased price. You can actually improve your margin by paying attention and getting ahead of these things. Now, obviously, you don't want to bet too big and end up carrying a bloated inventory that you'll suffer attrition or damage to, but making those smart decisions and making the small adjustments. I always say you've got three financial statements, right? You've got your income statement or P&L, which is the picture of your history, where you've been. You've got the statement of cash flows, which is your present day. Where are you at as a business today? And then you've got your balance sheet, which is the prognostication of your business future. And so when you're talking about these sociological threats, you're really going to want to pay a lot of attention to your balance sheet and do most of your work in balance sheet management. And then, you can also have tax strategies. If, in an environment where prices are going up, maybe you want to do last in, first out inventory management for tax purposes. And because you'll carry more costs on your balance sheet. And if prices are going down, you might want to revert back to first in, first out, because again, you're going to be carrying more value on your balance sheet for tax purposes. Now, some of these structures are literally just gaming your taxes. But hey, if you can lower your tax burden by a reasonable amount using legal, generally accepted accounting principles, why not, right? And then understanding different factors, like how did the trade wars that were going on, with China a few years back, how did that impact your position in the marketplace? If you're selling locally US products while there's a trade war going on, you're going to have a decided advantage locally because the imported products are necessarily more expensive because of the tariffs. And on other sides, when there are free trade agreements, you may have similar access to being a low cost leader or an innovation leader in a foreign market because you're not being charged a premium in the way of tariffs to sell overseas. So you might have an untapped market on overseas. And then, at the end of the day, it all comes down to be proactive and aware, understanding the fulcrum of where these levers of power are acting so that you can always position your business on the long end of the stick. Give yourself maximum leverage by being the one business in your industry that's actually paying attention to these external forces and leveraging and experiencing the upside rather than being taken off guard by the downside.
Mhm. Yes. Well, you've just said dozens of mouthfuls there, and I love how rapidly you covered so much territory in so little time. For our viewers and listeners, what I want to invite you to do is just take a breath now, because obviously each of these factors that Jason has been unpacking need their own attention, and that never gets done all at once. We're providing a high level overview here, not all of the nitty gritty details around deciding how you're going to deal with each of these factors. We just want you to know what factors are on the table here in terms of external risks and threats to be aware of and to develop a plan for dealing with. And that then doubles back to the personal level of all of this, which is about our own power in dealing with these external factors and risks and threats. And what I will lead off with is a quote from a Greek philosopher that goes all the way back to 1 AD, which his name was Epictetus. And the statement of his is, people aren't disturbed by things. We're disturbed by the thoughts we have about those things.
I like
and
that.
That's where power starts to live. It's not a risk factor or a threat, whether it's internal or external, whether it's avoidable or unavoidable. It's not that external thing that's the boss of us. That external thing obviously calls upon us to make choices because we're not the boss of whether that external factor surfaces or doesn't. We're the boss of our relationship with those factors. And that goes back to the core of what power is. So, power is nothing more or less than the capacity to have impact, the capacity to influence. So, people who are too full of themselves have very arrogant, overinflated ideas that they're in control of more things than they're really in control over, including something that may sound like a powerful chest beating stance, but actually a denial stance, which is where you might hear someone say, well, there are those factors out there, but we're not impacted. We're bulletproof. And, that may be true if clear strategic and tactical steps have been taken in order to become bulletproof. But the kind of attitude I'm talking about is the ostrich sticking their head in the sand attitude that says, well, yeah, we're so cool. We can't possibly be impacted by blank. And that's denial pretending to be power. So it's really important to get right with power. So neither learned helplessness, like what I described before, the victim mentality, the mentality that says, "Oh yeah, those external forces are so big that they're the boss of us." No, they're not. Nor the attitude of sticking your head in the sand in a very loud, blustery sounding way, pretending like your company's not impacted by external factors. Power is simply the capacity to have impact and have influence around factors that we may not have been the inventors of.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. It's kind of that ability to ask the question, what do we do with this information? And I think that as long as people are inquisitive, they're in a good place with power. And when they stop asking questions, they start getting into one of those two extremes. And that's why they're not inquisitive anymore about situations. So I really appreciate that you brought that up to me. This is something that I had never thought of in the detail that you brought it up. And so I really appreciate that. The other thing that occurs to me as we fly through this information as an introduction is that you as the listeners may be interested in having us unpack some of these items in a deeper way. And so even in this podcast, you have the power. There's a comment section, and we will pay attention to those comments. And if we hear a cry of saying, I need to know more about how balance sheets prognosticate the future, I need to understand this power thing more, please share that in the comment sections, subscribe, and we'll make sure that we get to it. So as we're segueing now into the success roadmap, we always want to leave you with a pathway to making the behavioral and operational changes that are going to deliver success. And so, what do you look for in solutions where the threats are outside of the bounds of your business? We've said it a few times, and the good doctor stole my line about sticking your head in the sand, but that's first and foremost. Be aware. I read a lot, and I've been reading a few books by Navy SEALs, and they always talk about when things really start popping off in a battle situation, somebody has to be able to take one step back and lift their head above the fray and get tactical clarity. This is great advice for every single individual, and especially business operators. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day of operations. And it's imperative that somebody on your team is designated as the leader who will step back, look above the fray, and gain periodic tactical clarity. And so that's the first and foremost piece of guidance I can offer for being successful.
For sure. It's crucial to have those canaries in your coal mine who can do exactly what you just said, Jason. So in addition to the awareness piece is self-management, managing yourself. And so what we've been covering in part in this episode is some of the ingredients in becoming what I refer to as upheavals literate, being well-versed in recognizing potential upheavals, in responding to actual upheavals. And the key to upheavals literacy in self-management is becoming anxiety resilient. There are some people who say, well, I don't get fearful about anything. I don't have any anxiety. Well, maybe you're not human, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
All of us have the capacity to become fearful or anxious about something. And what exists, of course, is a continuum from the core wisdom of fear, which is simply pay attention. That's what's underneath the emotion called fear. Well, we have a continuum with fear from simply an acknowledgement of, oh, this is something for me to pay attention to paralysis in anxiety and being chronically, ongoingly, perpetually anxious and everything in between. So becoming anxiety resilient is a crucial self-management piece, because if we ignore things we need to pay attention to, if we ignore fear that says pay attention, or if we become swallowed by anxiety, we're not doing good management, self-management. And if we're not doing good self-management, we're not capable of leading, and we're not capable of dealing with external risks and threats in good ways. So self-management is the second success roadmap piece for you.
Preach, doctor. And it's important to pay attention to the fact that fear and anxiety manifest themselves differently in every single individual. And, it's really crucial to have a team around you that can help you recognize the way that fear and anxiety is manifesting in you, and that you can help them do the same so that you can help each other stay on the rails. And then the next thing and the last piece to the success roadmap puzzle is becoming risk friendly. You had mentioned this already, but I love the tech industry. I love all the innovation that's going on. I love many of the mantras that come out, but this, move fast and break things, or fail fast, fail forward, those types of things, I don't think that they're complete in the description of how you be successful. I'm more interested in seeing businesses willing to fail smart, willing to fail in ways that guide the next step, rather than just moving fast and breaking things. And I think that's really important. Go out, make changes, take risks, take chances, and hit these external factors head on as they're approaching you, but do it in a way that's informed. Do it in a way that's, contemplated and prepared in advance, so that you know what you're doing when you get there. Trying to survive and thrive within the status quo is the surest way to ensure that you're going to become overwhelmed by external changes. But being, having a surfboard in the waves, or, whatever analogy you want to use, being proactive is going to be, the number one way that you can set yourself up for success in the face of certain changes and challenges.
Yes, well said. And that, you can think about this in terms of two offsetting risks at either side of a continuum in becoming risk friendly. And one that you just described, Jason, is what I call status quo addiction. We've always done it this way, so this is the way we should keep doing it. Mm-hmm. That there may be reasons to keep doing certain things because they're still working, but status quo addiction is not that. It's clinging to stuff that's outlived its usefulness, even though it's outlived its usefulness. And then the other side of that continuum is impulsivity. Status quo addiction is staying with something that's no longer working for too long after it's outlived its usefulness. At the other end is being impulsive, ready, fire, aim, that kind of approach. And that's the surest way to go down in flames because of external changes. So be aware of both of those ends of a risk imperiled continuum, so that you can become risk friendly. And I love your soundbite about don't fail fast, fail smart.
Thank you.
So that leads us into, I'm sorry, you were going to add?
Well, I was going to say this podcast has been soundbite heaven.
Yes, indeed. And so we'll wrap up with a couple of final sound bites with our takeaways that we want to recommend that you really contemplate from this episode? So take it away with the first takeaway.
Yeah, I'm gonna end right where I started by saying, you have more control over external forces than you think. Anybody who teaches or preaches that external threats are the threats for which you have no control, they're lying to you. So just understand that you have control, and then exercise thoughtfulness in how you take that control.
Absolutely. And then the other takeaway, at the risk of sounding self-serving, is that one of my two current books that I've co-authored with Mark S.A. Smith, they're interlocked volumes. One is called The Nimble C-Suite. The other is called The Nimble Company. And The Nimble Company, among other things, covers in chapters 3 and 4 a complete in-depth look at the sources and root causes of upheavals and upheavals literacy, and where we cover both internal and external threats and avoidable and unavoidable upheavals, and how to really become upheavals literate. So be looking for The Nimble Company wherever you like to get books, or whether print version or digital version or audiobooks.
Yes, and I'm enjoying the books right now as we speak, and they're powerful. There's a ton of good information in there, but these chapters 3 and 4 on The Nimble Company, great stuff to enhance what we've been talking about all day.
Thanks.
And on behalf of David Gruder and myself, we'd like to thank you for listening to the episode. I'd like to reiterate: subscribe, comment. We do read the comments. We will respond, and you'll help take the power and shape the podcast, Boosting Business Value, into the future. So we'll look forward to talking with you again very soon.
That's all for this episode of Boosting Business Value. May your new learning result in the smoothest and most profitable exit strategy for your business. With the right knowledge and guidance, the sky's the limit to what you can do. Do not miss an episode by subscribing to the show. And if you want to learn where your business currently stands, we also have free key opportunity assessments. Find all of them at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one.